Welcome to Soul Connections, a podcast about enchanting relationships with the human, more than human, and divine. I'm Emily.
I'm Aryn.
And I'm Dani.
Join us for illuminating conversations with radiant guests and Astro Church sermons that weave astrology, mythology, and tarot. Together, we invite you to make meaning with us out of the mystery through archetypes, patterns, and storytelling. Today is March 14th, 2025, and we have another Astro Church sermon for you today. And before we open up the sermon, we'd like to just briefly introduce ourselves, share our pronouns, and our big three. So my name is Emily. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Taurus sun, Gemini moon, and Leo rising.
I'm Aryn. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a Capricorn sun and rising with a Taurus moon.
And I'm Dani, and I use she with a capital S and they pronouns. And I am an Aries sun, a Pisces moon, and a Libra rising. Today is going to be another Astro Church segment. We place Astro Church at the end of the season to reflect on our lived experiences rather than predict them. So it's about finding meaning in what we've been through, connecting deeply to the stories that we're living in, and hopefully discovering some magic and hope for the future.
In this episode, we're going to talk a lot about Pisces season and focus a lot on Jupiter and Gemini, as well as Neptune and Pisces. Our tarot card connection for today is the Nine of Pentacles. And we do have a new segment that I'm very excited about, Herbal Connections with Emily, where we explore Tulsi or Holy Basil and the Pisces origin story of Aphrodite and Eros, who escaped from the great monster Typhon. Some of the themes that we'll be discussing today are connecting with our intuitive emotional responses about what's right versus what's wrong, especially when it's in relation, being in right relation with the world. We're also going to lean into joy, connection, and what lights us up as an act of resistance. It's very Piscean themes that we hope to bring out, and also having the courage to reclaim parts of ourselves, whether that means personally or collectively, that we have abandoned in the name of security.
Thank you, Aryn. So next is our universal shout-outs, which is the portion of Astro Church that we are holding space where we are uplifting and amplifying both individual and collective struggles and joys and triumphs. This is a space where we want to amplify and bring love and awareness to these issues, to these experiences, just to give them a little bit more love and a little bit more universal support. So, to my co-hosts and to our listeners, we invite you to take a deep grounding breath in through your nose and exhale, sigh out through your mouth. And so we invite the divine to be with us to receive these amplifications, these shout outs, and to just give them lots of love and support. So who would like to start us out?
I can start. I want to start with an exciting one. Vanessa Rose, a friend of ours, she is a chef and an organizer who is trying to organize a LGBTQ friendly space and restaurant in River West. And she's trying to obtain the company brewing space to do that, which is such an important space in the center of our community. And with the loss of a really important LGBTQ space, third space in Milwaukee, I just really want to uplift her and give her all the vibes to get that space and get that project going. Her restaurant is called Mothers. So, and it's a more complex concept than that. And I don't feel like I have enough of a grasp to talk about it. but I just want to give her all the love and support as she continues to grow this and build this with her team. And hopefully we'll have that really amazing space in River West soon. Universal shout out. And then another one that's personal. I have 3 friends actually that are going through some really major health concerns. One that's going through a cancer scare, and one that is going through some preventative surgery on Monday, and another one who has a pretty severe infection at the moment. And I just really want to uplift them and hold space for them. You know, we're in an eclipse portal at the moment, and so I just want them to be held by the universe as the gods and the planets kind of decide where we're going next. So universal shout out to them.
I would like to send a universal shout out to the folks who work at This Is It and the people who own it. This Is It is a really important gay bar that recently announced that they are closing their doors. They've been in Milwaukee, I believe, since 1956. So losing a really important queer gathering space. I haven't lived in Milwaukee for too long, but that is a space that I have very fond queer memories at. And so it's just really, people are really devastated. It was sort of out of the blue and unexpected. So sending all the love and support to those actually impacted by that, who don't have a job right now, as well as just the queer community in Milwaukee and also outside who would visit. This Is It is a space that people would often go to if they're not from here. So wanting to send a universal shout out to everybody impacted by.
I think there only one other one that I really wanted to share is a collective one. Collective and personal for many, many, many people. We're going to talk at some point later about the rise of ICE and the fascist policies of disappearing people who dissent, particularly around Palestine. And particularly in the case of Mahmoud Khalil and the disappearance of him. And there are thousands and thousands of American Jews right now who are doing really important ancestral work, standing up to the genocide that is happening in Palestine, and also standing up for Mahmoud Khalil and his kidnapping by the United States government. They occupied Trump Tower yesterday, and hundreds of people were arrested. It was the day before Purim, which is an important holiday in the Jewish tradition, and it celebrates Esther, who stood up against a king or a leader that was intending to commit genocide against the Jewish people. And so I just want to really uplift both the family and all the people affected by the disappearance of Mahmoud Khalil and the kidnapping of him, as well as all of the American Jewish people who are doing such deep and I'm sure heartbreaking and grief-full ancestral work right now. So universal shout out to them.
Thank you both. So we invite our community to hold all of these shout outs into your heart, and to ask for love and support and guidance for everyone who has been mentioned, the joys, the opportunities, the struggles, collective and individual. And so let's close out universal shout outs with another deep breath in through our noses. And as we exhale, send love and support out to everyone named. Universal shout outs. Thank you. And now I would like to hand it over to Dani for our story connection for today.
Our story connection for today is the flight of Aphrodite. Emily first heard this story from Jason Hawley, who's an astrologer based out of New Mexico. And I rewrote it, the myth. It's a myth that is associated with the sign of Pisces, and I rewrote it. So I'm going to read that to you right now. The sky was burning. The great monster Typhon, chaos incarnate, raged across the heavens, clawing at the stars. He had already wounded Zeus, already sent great gods fleeing. As his shadow stretched over Mount Olympus, Aphrodite, the great goddess of love, and her son Eros, the divine spark of desire, had nowhere to go. The land had split open, the air thick with fear. The gods of war would take up arms, but Aphrodite was not prepared for battle. She knew that to fight in this way would mean ruin, for no blade could cut through a storm. Typhon was too vast, too terrible. Only love, only the unbreakable thread of connection could slip through the chaos and lead them to freedom. So she did what love has always done in the face of destruction. She transformed. Heart pounding, Aphrodite took Eros' hand and with a whispered prayer bound herself to him with an unbreakable thread. The two leapt from the cliffs, and before they could touch the water, their bodies shimmered, dissolved, and became two fish, silver and gleaming, slipping beneath the waves. In the great river they vanished, disappearing into the currents, where light bends and time moves differently. They surrendered to the flow. Typhon raged, but ye could not reach them there. Chaos has no hold on the water, for the water engulfs, encompasses, and becomes. And so, through the mysterious waters they swam, side by side, mother and child, spark and connection, tied by a thread more powerful than the fear of the storm, a thread of knowing, trust, and love. In their devotion, they were not lost, but held by the water as well as each other, and led by the great current that carries all things to where they're meant to be. The gods of war would clash and the world would burn, but the gods of love could not be destroyed. And when they last emerged, the heavens marked their passage, two fish bound together, shining in the night sky, a reminder that in times of chaos, we fight by refusing to be severed, by dancing together in the dark, by tying ourselves together so that none of us are lost. Aryn, would you do our tarot connection for today?
Yeah, thank you for that story. Very powerful and excited to talk more about it. So our tarot connection today is the Nine of Pentacles. This is a card from Lisa Sterl's Modern Witch Tarot deck, which I really recommend, especially for folks who are starting out with tarot as well. So this card is really special to me. I often pull it when I need reminders of all the abundance that I already have in my world. So just starting off with some basics, we have 9, which in Minor Arcana, there's 10 cards that go through. So we're at the end of a cycle. We also have the Pentacles, which is a symbol that's connected to Earth. And in that light, this card tends to deal with things of an earthly matter, whether that means like our material possessions, or even think too of just the things that we can see that's in front of us. Sometimes you can actually see the support of your friends showing up for you, or you might be able to like, not just objects, but see love as it's manifested through maybe food or community care. So sometimes people think, oh, Earth automatically means like materialistic, like of the physical world, but there's things that we can see that are concepts that might be more related to like other elements in tarot. So to me, whenever I pull this card, it's really about appreciation. As you can see in this image, you have somebody who's pausing in their garden. And I think the garden is really symbolic. You have the pentacles too, but in this particular card, you have like carrots and tomatoes. So this person has put in the hard work to grow this, and they're taking a moment to really appreciate all of that. I think regardless of when you pull this card, it is a reminder of like you're almost at the end. Like take a moment to take a breath and see all the things that you've created, all of the work that you've already put into this. There's also some aspect of like simple pleasures too. It might just be listening to the birds sing, or it might be looking at your vegetable garden, or it might be having a coffee break with your friend and just admiring the sunshine. So there's kind of a small pleasures aspect to this card. And also this idea of material abundance that doesn't necessarily mean wealth as like, I'm a billionaire and I hoard wealth. It's more of like appreciating the wealth that you have. And that might be, again, it could be riches in terms of physical or material security, but it could just be like the wealth of friendship, the wealth of family, the wealth of like hard work that led to some sort of fruit or vegetable, or in an immaterial sense, maybe like a project coming to light. The number 9 is connected to the Hermit card in tarot, which is number 9 in the major arcana, and that's connected to Virgo as well. So we have some Virgo themes here, definitely with the material, physical like manifestations of Earth being represented in this card. Also, in regards to Virgo, in the second decan of Virgo, which is ruled by Venus, we have Virgo's precision and discernment accompanied with this Venusian beauty and harmony, which of course it makes sense that a garden would be depicted in this, because gardens take a lot of like thoughtfulness and commitment and ability to like pivot and be flexible when things come up, and they lead to this gorgeous Venusian, beautiful, or even like edible food that is nourishing. So we have like Virgo and Venus kind of dancing together in this card. And I think too, we can think too about like our rituals of care, what that looks like for us, what that looks like for our community. We did also have like, we have a a Virgo full moon eclipse. We have Venus retrograde happening. So there's a lot of things happening astrologically that tie really poignantly with this card. And also, we can't forget that Venus is exalted in Pisces, which we did experience that. So I think this card marries this sort of material wealth and abundance, but also with this like spiritual depth and connectedness. Because again, I think in small moments like this where you're just appreciating nature and the world around you, that's like you're connecting to divinity. It doesn't have to be like you're in a church or you're in like a sacred space, but like every space can be sacred if you make it that way and you feel that way. So again, I think bringing up the Virgo Pisces axis is really important in this card to understand it and give it some more depth, especially in the context of the astrological weather. Virgo is the tangible. It's the actual like fruit of your labor. But Pisces might more be like the unseen or like the spiritual connection that you're fostering by nourishing the ground and nourishing your body. So here, Virgo's ritualistic love meets Pisces' universal love. Virgo is refining, Pisces is dissolving, and both of them are necessary forces to exist in that pattern, in that cycle together. And this card comes up for me, especially in times when I'm kind of in a Four of Pentacles mindset, which the Four of Pentacles is a card about like worry and I'm anxious and do I actually have security? And this card is like, yes, you actually do. And there's many ways that you can engage with it. And you might not always be able to see it, but if you take a moment to actually stop and appreciate it, those feelings come up. So I think even with all this dreamy Pisces party energy happening where things feel a little untethered or emotional, this can be a very grounding card. And also find like we can have that grounded foundation through this practice of noticing, of patience, of appreciation, in some ways devotion as well. There is so much love and abundance and nourishment and care that is always surrounding us at any given time, even in the most maybe, I'm trying to think of the right word, when we feel despair or we feel limited or we feel like there's forces outside of our control that are creating lack or fear that we can really ground ourselves and just taking a moment to appreciate all the work that you've done to get here. So now I'm going to turn it over to Emily for our herbal connection today.
What a beautiful tarot offering. Thank you, Aryn. Just really sinking into the Pisces Virgo axis with that one. So I also feel like our Nine of Pentacles, right? Like that's our first Pentacles card of since we started doing Astro Church on the podcast. And I think it's also pretty synchronous that we're also introducing the herbal connection today. So I was really thinking of the abundance in that card with the tomatoes, with the vegetables, and also that totally correlates with the abundance of the earth and the abundance of the beautiful, beautiful herbs that we have all over this big, blue, beautiful planet. So I'm really excited about this, that we're going to incorporate this moving forward. And I just want to share a little Pisces story. We'll have our interview with Kristen published in the coming weeks, but I got a reading with our guest, Kristen, and one of the messages she channeled from my team for me was that they want me to speak more publicly about the connection between plants and planets. Or plants and, celestial astrology, that connection. So now I am feeling confident enough to do that. And I'm really excited and grateful for Dani and Aryn's encouragement to add this section to Astro Church. So thank you. And so thinking about Pisces, so this herbal connection section will be thinking about the energy of the solar season that we are in, which we are in Pisces season, and really connecting with a plant that embodies that archetype, that energy. And so with Pisces, so spiritual, so expansive, so flowing, so full of vibrance and a deep, profound connection with the oneness of all and with the divine. So I had one plant initially in mind, and then this other plant came in and said, no, it is me. And there could not be a more perfect fit for Pisces season, in my opinion, than Tulsi or holy basil, which is known as the queen of herbs. Holy basil is an aromatic perennial in the mint family. And so one thing about mint family plants, they are abundant. You add them to your garden one time, and a lot of gardeners will tell you this, that like you likely want to contain mint to a pot. And so any plant in the mint family, they're just so abundant. They grow effortlessly. They will take over the garden. Very Jupiterian in that way, just multiplying and growing. And so holy basil is in the mint family. It has this beautiful, beautiful aroma. You walk by any holy basil plant and the scent will just, it'll cause a deep sigh, and it's just such a beautiful scent. And there's these beautiful purple flowers, these small little purple flowers that grow that attract all of the bees. So it's a very pollinator friendly plant. And so this beautiful plant is native to tropical and subtropical regions of Asia, Australia, and the Western Pacific. And now in our modern day, they have been naturalized in many tropical regions of the Americas. And even in our temperate climates here in the Northern Hemisphere and in Wisconsin, we too can grow holy basil. And I have a holy basil plant in my garden. And so this is a renowned and a revered herb in the Ayurvedic tradition. And holy basil is known as an adaptogen. And any plant that gets classified as an adaptogen means that this plant supports our bodies in adapting to stress. So I'm already thinking of the story connection with the typhon, right? Like this is an herb that can help us adapt to stress. And also this is a beautiful plant to connect with the divine, to clear our mind and give us clarity of mind so that our intuitive channels can be open and we can connect with the divine. And so I want to share this beautiful card from my herbal astrology oracle deck. So here you can see the holy basil plant. And then here are the beautiful flowers. And this is a representation of the goddess Lakshmi, a Hindu goddess. And so this is from the Herbal Astrology Oracle deck written by Adriana Ayelis, and the artwork is by Josephine Clerks. And so this is a sacred plant in Hinduism, and having one in the home is believed to bring blessings and a closer connection to the divine. Tulsi is the plant embodiment of Lakshmi, like I mentioned. And Lakshmi in Hinduism is the goddess of wealth, fortune, prosperity, beauty, fertility, royal power, and abundance. And to me, all of those significations scream Venus and Jupiter. And Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces, and Venus is exalted in Pisces. So it felt like a perfect fit. Adriana Ayelis, who is one of my teachers in the astral herbal lineage, she, and in her deck here, she says that, and I would agree with this, that rulership of this plant belongs to Mercury because of the mental clarity, and Jupiter for the divine spiritual connection. So we get both Mercury and Jupiter, a polarity, and this plant embodies both. And then, of course, with the Lakshmi connection, we also get some Venus in there as well. And so I wanted to read a passage from the guidebook of this deck that Adriana Ayelis left, and then I'll leave us there. But Adriana writes that Tulsi is regarded as a living gateway between heaven and earth and believed to be a manifestation of the divine within. Tulsi is here today to teach that the key to Jupiter's doorway, abundance, and wisdom is to live, create, and communicate from a place of wonder, innocence, impeccability, Mercury in parentheses, rather than doubt and confusion. And so my favorite preparations of Tulsi is to simply drink Tulsi as a tea, which I have done as we've been recording this episode. And I'm excited to make Tulsi into an infused oil to have that beautiful aroma as an anointing oil. So that is Tulsi. Thank you, Tulsi. I will now hand it to Dani.
Thank you, Tulsi. Wow, how beautiful. Like, because when I pulled the Nine of Pentacles, I mean, that just popped out, like that, it's not, and they're so connected, like, and, you said there's that polarity between Mercury and Jupiter. And just for anybody who didn't quite catch why Emily calls that a polarity, it's because the signs that those planets rule. So Mercury rules Virgo, Mercury rules Gemini, and then Jupiter rules Pisces, and Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So those signs are opposite of one another. And so that's why there's a polarity between the Mercury as a planet and Jupiter as a planet. And it's just that beautiful synchronicity and like connection to the divine in like a earthly way. Just goes so well with all of the themes that we have. So very exciting. I love when things are connected like that. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pisces. I'm a Pisces moon. I'm the resident Pisces here, and I love Pisces energy. I could swim in Pisces energy all day long. It is the last sign of the zodiac. It's like when you're really, really, really old people who start to get childlike again. They reflect on their lives and they tell a lot of stories. And there's a little bit of an element of like play and imagination, and almost like it's like the end, but it's also the beginning again. It's like, as when we come back to the source and when we go back into the source to kind of become along with everyone else. Emily describes it as oceanic, and I associate it as well with how the rivers flow in and out of that oceanic energy. It is, as we were talking about in our story connection, two fish tied together and swimming in opposite directions. So that's the symbol of Pisces. It's ruled by Neptune in modern astrology, and Jupiter in traditional astrology. Neptune is the god of the ocean. So again, there's this oceanic energy. Pisces is a water sign, and it's mutable water. So if you think about those two fish tied together going opposite ways, mutability, when we say mutable, we're talking about how that elemental energy is being moved by that sign. And with mutable signs, the energy is moved in sort of this back and forth motion. So there's movement with mutable energy. Mutable signs also take us from one season into the next season. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are moving from winter into spring. And when Pisces season ends will be the spring equinox, which that's our official launch for our podcast, everybody. So if you're in the Milwaukee area, come to the Jazz Gallery and celebrate with us on Thursday the 20th. So yeah, if you think about this like ocean connection to the rivers, the ocean, there's this element, and Neptune specifically, Neptune dissolves. There's this element of like refraction or reflection, the bending like the surface of the ocean. There's so much depth beyond what you can see with your logical brain and your logical eyes. And it's more of like a felt depth that is there. And also the ocean is like space, is like our brains. It's unexplored, it's vast, it's expansive. So there's an element with Pisces energy of being associated with other worlds, like dream worlds, fairy worlds. Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces, has to do with expansion and abundance. And so if we think about entering into like a portal of another world, and then there's just a whole nother world there for us, that's that expansive Jupiter energy. The universe like just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding and never stops, and that's very Piscean. Also, I associate Pisces with like alternate timelines and realities and stories, because it's non-specific. Like there's a lot of non-specific energy to it. And so, sometimes I'm like, with my Pisces energy, I'm like, trying to ground back into reality. And I tell that Pisces energy, I'm like, it's true. It's possible that what you are seeing in the story you're telling is true somewhere in the timeline. You know what I'm saying? Like there's an element of needing to be open to all of those possibilities for Pisces energy. Again, that Jupiter expansiveness. You don't want to contract on that Jupiter energy. And also with its connection to Virgo, which I'll get into in a minute, there's a need to ground ourselves back into reality, because Pisces can be so expansive that it can be overwhelming almost and never stop. The other thing is the way that Pisces communicates is nonlinear. So it's a lot of storytelling, music, poetry, art, dance, as a way of communicating rather than linear language or mercurial language. It's mystical. There's like a mystical energy to that. It's a sacred form of communication, and also just connection with the divine. For Pisces, again, it's the ocean. It's all these other worlds. So everything is connected with Pisces energy. We're all the same. It's when we're returning back to the source at the very end, and also coming out of the source in the beginning. It's that balsamic moon, like final moon cycle at the very end before we burst forth in Aries season. So everything is connected to Pisces energy. We have ancient wisdom, deep compassion, and we just know we're all from that same source. We're all interconnected and part of a bigger whole for Pisces. And even in moments of chaos, Pisces, there's this element of everything is sacred with Pisces energy. Everything works together to create this divine web of existence. And because of that, like Neptune is sometimes referred to, again, it's ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, Jupiter in traditional astrology, Neptune in modern astrology. Neptune is sometimes called the higher vibration of Venus. And so it has to do with universal love. So Pisces energy reminds us that we're divine, all divine and lovable at our core. Every single being on this earth, not just humans, plants, animals, even our chairs, to Pisces energy have life, because a human being had to create that and you had to cultivate the stuff that from the earth to create that, and somebody transported it to, there's just, Pisces can feel all the energy that goes into some of these things that maybe seem more simple. And And because of that, just expansive, connected stuff, there can be sometimes some blurred boundaries with Pisces energy. It's just like expansive compassion. So sometimes there's this deep psychic sensitivity that's really absorbent and intuitive and knows the connection of everything around us, but it can be ungrounded sometimes, and that and non-discerning. And that's where Virgo comes in my opinion. I always like to look at, right now we're in an eclipse portal. We just had a full moon eclipse in Virgo last night. And when I say right now, I mean in this very day that we're recording this episode. And so Virgo is, heavy involved in this Pisces conversation today. Also with the Nine of Pentacles and with Tulsi, there's this relationship that the two of them have where Virgo is the vessel for this Piscean expansion on this earth, and Virgo is just as devoted and compassionate and sacred, and commitment to the sacred is really important to Virgo energy. They just do it in such differing ways, but those ways really work together really, really well. So together they can mean compassionate service, a continuous offering of oneself to the divine via ritual or our everyday activities, balancing surrender and control or expansiveness and rootedness. And also like there's a martyr aspect to both Virgo and Pisces to that aspect. So there's also something about like the dangers of self-abandonment in the name of being of service. And I also just, because it's Easter season and all that, I just want to throw out the connection to the Christian mythology, which is Jesus and his mother, Mary. So Jesus is the fish, which is a symbol of universal love, and the Christian spiritual lineage, which Pisces and associating with a spiritual lineage is also a key thing. And Virgo is, the Virgin Mother, opposite of that, who is the physical vessel of that spiritual power on this earth. And she also tends to that vessel through to its departure from the earth. So they say she cast aside the sheets when he was resurrected, for example. She tended and washed his feet at the cross, So that's like that Virgo, like earthly tending to this divine spirit. And then also obviously the resurrection story as a martyrdom story. And also belief in something greater, like if there's a death and a rebirth. That's very Virgoan and Piscean. So yeah, that's Pisces. Emily, do you want to talk a little more about Jupiter?
Yes, and I just wanted to share an image that came to me when you were talking about the expansiveness of Pisces and the rootedness of Virgo. I was really getting this visual of my favorite meditation when I specifically want to feel grounded and yet open my channel to the divine, which is a simple meditation that many mystics and people out there are regularly doing, where you visualize rooting into the earth and growing roots out of your body, so that you're connected, you're grounded, and that you're receiving, the earth's grounding and the earth's wisdom. And then you visualize opening from your crown chakra up into the stars and into the universe and the divine, to receive that divine inspiration and messages. And so I just really get that mental picture of Virgo and Pisces, because exactly to your point, they are both devoted. They are both of service. And I really think of like Virgo doing it through work with their hands. And I think of the Vestal Virgins, right, as related to Virgo, and the maintenance of the sacred flame of Rome, and the labor, the physical labor of working with their hands, because of this belief, right? Because of this devotion to the goddess Vesta, right? And that devotion to Vesta is Piscean. And then the physical labor of maintaining the sacred flame, that is Virgo. So I just wanted to bring those two together because I think they are so profound and resonant for what we're talking about. And so Jupiter, the other thing that really lit up for me, Dani, when you were talking about the Piscean ability to feel and to sense and to know that we are all from the same source and that we are all divine beings. To me, that feels very Jupiterian. And so Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. And Jupiter is the greater benefic. In astrology, the two benefics are Venus and Jupiter. And so they call Jupiter the greater benefic. And I really think of Jupiter as like spiritual belief, faith. And I think Jupiter in the Piscean expression is this very benevolent, expansive, compassionate, just like I think of a wise, like elder teacher. I'm really thinking of like the 13 indigenous grandmothers, of how they feel, and the wisdom keepers that they are, passing on their sacred indigenous traditions and knowledge down through the lineages, to the people in their tribes, and being the keepers of that knowledge. That feels very Jupiterian in a Piscean expression to me. Jupiter is all about generosity and abundance and wealth. And again, circling back to Tulsi, being the plant embodiment of the goddess Lakshmi, who is the goddess of wealth and abundance, and also to the Nine of Pentacles, that when we talk about wealth and abundance, it does not mean that we are hoarding tangible wealth and that we are billionaires. It means that we are so rooted and present in our lives that we can really tap into that Jupiter and Pisces nature of seeing the divinity in everything. And for me, that comes as simply as, right, tending a garden and seeing the divinity and consciousness in the plants, and really feeling and believing that plants are sentient beings that we can be in relationship with. And I think all of those kind of experiences speak to Jupiter and Pisces and Jupiter's rulership over Pisces. And I feel like this conversation is just so flowing because that is the nature of Pisces. And I don't want to get too off track, but there's a lot with Jupiter and Pisces, and there's lots of different stories and anecdotes. And I think that's the best way to describe it. Like you said, it's not something I can pinpoint, even though that's what my Gemini moon likes to do. It's more expansive, it's more flowing. And so it's better told through stories, through archetypes, through symbols. And so the modern ruler of Pisces is Neptune. So Aryn, would you want to share a little bit about Neptune?
Yes. As someone with Neptune at 22 degrees of Capricorn on my 21-degree ascendant and 20-degree sun, I feel very tied to Neptune. And I think it's worth stating before we start is that Neptune wasn't actually discovered until 1846. So ancient astrologers, we don't know. Maybe they were aware of Neptune. They couldn't see it without a telescope, though, which is why it was discovered later because of technology. So that being said, we don't have thousands of years of astrologers discussing Neptune like we do with like Saturn or Jupiter, which were visible without telescopes in the ancient world. So just want to state that at first, that Neptune is seen as a modern addition to astrology. And you might see when you're researching like Neptune and Pisces that Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces, just as Jupiter is the ancient ruler. And so I think as these traditions evolve and connect, we like to discuss both of them because some astrological traditions or people don't really think about Jupiter as the ruler of Pisces. But I think the combination of those two planets are really interesting to analyze. So just wanted to state that. And also, fun fact, when it was discovered, Neptune was in Aquarius and it was exactly conjunct Saturn in Aquarius at 25 degrees, which is really fascinating. But Neptune in general is an archetype that is very oceanic. It's connected to the god of the ocean, Poseidon. Even the symbol of Neptune looks like a trident. So very water heavy imagery. Also, when you look at the planet, it's blue. So there's just a lot of like aesthetically connected with that sort of stereotypical Pisces energy archetype aesthetics. You will sometimes see Neptune referred to as a higher vibration of Venus. I say higher, not as in like better or more evolved. It's more of like a universal because Neptune is a generational planet. It takes a really long time to orbit the sun. So therefore, it's not necessarily going to have a day-to-day kind of impact on you like Venus will, or even Neptune in your chart isn't necessarily going to give you much information on like your relationship values as Venus is, but it connects to this sort of universal love because Neptune dissolves. That's one of the functions of it. It dissolves, it creates mist, it's rather dreamy, it's not bound by linear conventions of time. So again, this is all sounding like very Piscean in its energies. I think of that emoji with the mist over its face, so you can't see its mouth. That's like, I think of like what Neptune does is that. And as someone with Neptune conjunct a really personal point, like the ascendant and the sun, I feel like for me, I've always been perceived as a shapeshifter. People will often be like, "Do I know you? You look familiar." And I'm like, no, I think it's just Neptune conjunct my ascendant, where it's like, I do have this sort of shapeshifter ability. And because it, like, the ascendant is oftentimes how other people perceive us, because it's the energy that we project. Yeah, they see that within me. And I think too that there's, you know, both positive and negative manifestation of these archetypes is that the great dissolver can be positive if it's dissolving harmful structures, right? Or it can be harmful if it's dissolving structures that support the people. And I'm like thinking of like what's happening in the US government as I say that. But you know, it could go either way. And actually Neptune can kind of have like a more malefic influence, as like I've heard some astrologers think of Neptune's influence as like more on the malefic side, because it's hard to work with energy that is difficult to pinpoint or talk about. I also think too, Neptune transits, like if you ever have like Neptune opposite or square the sun, or even conjunct it, like it can have like it drains our physical energy, but it also boosts our psychic capacity and our energy. So I think Neptune transits with any planet, just I would be considerate of like your energy. Also considerate of like how does it open you up, right? Because like the great dissolver creates new opportunities for connection. And Neptune, again, is like connected to our collective generational kind of vibe. So how can, even if we're maybe temporarily physically drained, our emotional or our psychic perception actually might be activated or stimulated. And I also think of Neptune as really important for artists because it is a psychically creative planet. Maybe this is just me reinterpreting Neptune as actually a benefic energy. So with that porousness creates shape-shiftiness. Porousness also means we're more susceptible and vulnerable, for better or worse. So just want to throw that out there as well. But I love Neptune personally, and Neptune is at home in Pisces, and now Neptune in Pisces is moving into Neptune in Aries, and we've had Neptune here since 2011. So that's a long time. That's like what, 14-ish years of Neptune staying in one sign. And we can talk more about like it entering into Aries at a later date, but it'll do a thing where it'll go into Aries and then it'll retrograde and go back into Pisces. So we'll have like Neptune officially in Aries March, or no, not, sorry, I'm thinking of like fully in Aries. I think it's 2026 is when we're not going back anymore. So this is an interesting astrological time to think about like, wow, what has been happening in my life since Neptune was here? What house does it rule in my natal chart? What is it transiting? Is Neptune interacting with any of my planets? So that's Neptune. So now we're actually going to talk more about the astro transits that have been happening during Pisces season. And we're going to share that on the screen.
Thanks, Aryn. That was great. Both of you. It was great. Yeah, so, you know, to streamline this, we kind of want to talk about a couple of specific transits, and we'll touch on some of the other stuff that's going on, because always the planets are always moving and they're always talking to each other, and there's stuff always going on. But because Pisces is traditionally ruled by Jupiter, I want to point out where Jupiter is in the sky right now. So this is today's chart, right? This is from like last night when the eclipse happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like overnight, essentially. Yep. So Jupiter is right here in Gemini at 13 degrees of Gemini. Now, it's interesting because Jupiter, we were talking earlier about how we have that polarity between Mercury and Jupiter because of their rulership. So Jupiter in Gemini is actually in a sign that it's like, it's called its detriment. meaning that it's in the opposite of the sign that it rules. So Jupiter rules Sagittarius. It's in Sagittarius's opposite, Gemini. And more notably for Pisces season, it happens to also be making a sign-based square to this Pisces party happening, where we have Saturn, the Sun, the North Node, and even Neptune all here together in Pisces. So there's this challenging aspect to this. Again, Jupiter in Gemini is in its detriment, meaning it's not home there. It's in the opposite of its home. So it's like Gemini wants to like kind of get to the different details and stuff, and Jupiter's like bigger thinking than that, and it's squaring Pisces, the Pisces party over here. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's one of the key transits we're going to talk about. The other one is what happened overnight, last night, is the Virgo full moon eclipse, which initiated us into this season's eclipse season. So that is up here in Virgo. We have Virgo conjunct the south node of the moon. And then opposite of that is the sun conjunct the north node of the moon, which is what makes an eclipse. When the sun in the north node and the moon in the south node come together, there's an eclipse. So we have this eclipse. We had an eclipse 6 months ago in September that was in Pisces. And then we're going to have more eclipses in this Virgo and Pisces axis come September of this year. And then the third one that we wanted to talk about is Venus, the great goddess Venus in Aries. And she is currently retrograde right now in Aries. She will move into Pisces. She hasn't yet in Pisces season. So we're going to talk more about her transit through Aries today. But those are kind of the three main things. So this Jupiter square Pisces party, Jupiter and Gemini square Pisces party, this opposition, and then Venus retrograde. So I want to turn it over to Aryn. Do you want to talk about the lunar eclipse stuff?
Yes, I would like to start with the lunar eclipse in Virgo, since we already have that chart, and then I'll go back to talk about the new moon in Pisces that happened about 2 weeks ago. I'm really feeling this one. It's the moon is right on my natal Chiron in Virgo, so I'm just like really tired. Just like thinking about things. But okay, so we have the lunar eclipse coming in, which where we are in Milwaukee, I actually got off work around like midnight, and I could begin to see the eclipse happening. I didn't see like the peak of it, but it was really cool to look up and see part of the moon obscured. So shout out to anybody who actually got up at that ungodly hour to look at it. So we have, again, this polarity of Pisces and Virgo, of connecting the spiritual with the tangible, like our habits with the results that they bring. And I feel like this one for me feels very embodied. I'm feeling like exhausted in my physical body. I'm wanting to spend more time to rest and recuperate. I think eclipses in general, most witches and people, astrologers would say like, these are not times to go hard, to just like overextend yourself. This might be a period of time where you're really just like making sense of it. Eclipses can stir up chaos. We also have retrogrades happening. So there's just, I think in general, the sort of thematic transit, or thematic word I would think of with this transit is just, it's like a time of reflection, of like taking stock, of resting, of seeing like what happens in your dreams. And let's see, we have Saturn also really close to Pisces at 22 degrees. So, I mean, Saturn's presence in this to me could expose our limits. Again, it could be physical, could be emotional, could be mental. I also think that when the sun is conjunct Saturn, it can feel challenging to our energies, because our sun is like what like gives us that energy, what lights us up. Not necessarily in like the way that Mars is, where it's more about like our action and our motivation, but the sun is still a really important source of our like personal energy. And so when Saturn's next to it, it could limit it, it could depress it, it could also structure it. It could be like, hey, I see you have this like all this energy, like what are you doing with it? Like to make it generative or productive. So we have Saturn in there too. Of course, like the North Node conjunct the Sun too. To me, that feels like a signature of like, yes, like go towards the things that you're obsessed with, that you're fixated on. The North Node really is that hunger, that passion, that drive. Sometimes it results in like mysterious ways. You're like, why am I so drawn or obsessed with this particular thing? The Sun could be highlighting that for you. And then, of course, when we have the Moon at the other end of that, the South Node, there could also be the desire, but like, I want to be comfortable. Like, I want to like feel safe in my pursuits. So the eclipse can really stir up the sort of pendulum effect that oppositions tend to have. And the whole point of opposition is to find some sort of integration between these two things. So how can we make the Virgo part of our chart happy by being strategic and detail oriented and thinking about our routines or our physical realities and materials, while also balancing that need for mystery, that curiosity, that sort of everything is connected and I'm a part of this. How do we connect those two ideas together?
Can I say something about this axis too? Because I'm going through my nodal return right now, so I've been really feeling this personally. When I say nodal return, I mean my nodes of the moon in my natal chart are the same. They're in my north nodes in Pisces, my south nodes in Virgo. So it just happens like every 20 years, basically, where you go through a nodal return. So I've only been through one in my life. This is my second one. And I just like really see this with Saturn here too being present. Like Saturn is very serious and it's in Pisces. So it's like taking Piscean themes seriously, you know?
Yeah.
And there's an element of surrender with Pisces energy, whereas Virgo is very controlling. And so when we have the North Node, like calling us, we're like hungry for something and we're going after it. That is extremely uncomfortable energy. North Node energy is not comfortable. South Node energy is comfortable. It's like, that's what we came into this world with. That's what we know. So South Node is like this perfectionist Virgo stuff, you know, and a lot more to Virgo than that. I'm sorry. I don't mean to just call it a perfectionist, but like there's, when it comes to like the healing piece of it, what are we healing or what are we kind of like letting go of in service of opening ourselves to that hunger of that Pisces energy to connect, to merge, to be a part of something greater, you know? And so for me, the Virgo South Node stuff is like healing imposter syndrome, like trying something even if we're not perfect at it. Like letting go of some control a little bit and leaning into the connection that we have. Also like not needing everything to like logic, like not needing to know, you know, because Virgo likes to know things. Virgo likes to have the details. Virgo likes to list things out, you know, so it's like Pisces is like, everything is true. So like, how can you ever know? You know what I mean? So it's more leaning into that and also leaning maybe a little bit more into trust. Which again is uncomfortable. If we're chasing, you know, we're following the North Node, we're not familiar with trusting. We trust what we know, which is comfort. You know, it's like I can control that. You know, that's what Virgo says. I can control that. Whereas with Pisces, you really can't control the flow of life, you know? So I just think that's just such an interesting, like combination. Because I agree, it's about integrating the two. And also like Virgo being the South Node, I think of like healing some of the more unskillful things about Virgo and using that Pisces pull to heal some of that stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Emily, could you do the new moon in Pisces? Beautiful. So the new moon in Pisces happened on February 27th. So again, with the new moon and full moon cycles, we can think of them as these small windows of time where we can connect the dots. So thinking about what was happening at the end of February for you versus what is happening now in the middle of March, these things are connected. And also, these won't be the final eclipses in Virgo Pisces axis because we have many more to come. But these are sort of introduction. And I think a lot of the themes that they're stirring up can be symbolic of what you might experience with these. So for this one, we have so many things happening in Pisces right now, or during the new moon in Pisces. So Of course, the sun and the moon are there at 9 degrees. Saturn is not conjunct it, but we do have Saturn in Pisces as well. Mercury was in Pisces at this point. And you can also see Neptune is at 28 degrees as well, getting ready to move into Aries soon. So we have a ton of Pisces things happening. And then we have some important like other connections that are being happening here. So for let's see. Okay, I see. So it's not actually connecting to Mars, which Mars is in Cancer at 17 degrees and is making a trine to Saturn. So that's nice too. I think like personally, I've been tracking how I feel around lunar cycles for about 2 or 3 years now. And every time I look back at my new moon and Pisces notes, I'm always like, I'm feeling so good. I feel so creative, so interconnected. For me, I think I have the 3rd house in Pisces, and like I'm a very expressive, communicative person. And so whenever this Pisces energy happens, I feel so invigorated, very spiritually invigorated, very creatively invigorated. I have a lot of ideas popping up. At the same time, though, Pisces isn't necessarily known for its executive functioning skills or its ability to follow through. So I think this lunar signal cycle really feels like it opens things. It creates new pathways, or maybe not even new pathways, connects you to old pathways. And
it also is square Jupiter, like Jupiter at 12 degrees in Gemini was squaring it too, which when you're talking about opening and you know, that kind of stuff, I just think of Jupiter and Gemini. And that mutable square is interesting because it's like very like hyping each other up type energy. It's like almost like creating the stories and the illusions rather than like challenging each other like a fixed square would or something.
Well, and to me, it is because the Pisces new moon is being like filtered or fractalized through this Jupiter and Gemini. It's like taking the expansiveness of Pisces and then almost amplifying it. Like there's infinite timelines, there's infinite creative endeavors. And that's kind of the energy of this, is that it's really harnessing and like anything is possible. And then the struggle that would come from that would be like, well, where do I start? Analysis paralysis. If everything is possible, if I'm receiving all of these downloads, all of these ideas, and Jupiter and Gemini is like, yeah, go with it. Like you said, Dani, they're like supporting each other, but the frictional, the square nature would be, well, like we are humans and bodies with limited capacity and limited energy. And I think that's where the square tension could come in there.
Absolutely. It could be overwhelming. I think even too that there's a path through that overwhelm too. I think at least as an artist, part of what artists do is making sense of all those like possibilities and bringing forth what really resonates with them. So I feel like during this period, I'm really grounded on the idea that like what's coming to fruition or what that I'm experiencing or the new cycle that this new moon is birthing. I don't really know where it's going to end up, or I don't really know all of the details, and I'm letting it sort of flow through me rather than thinking about, okay, well, what does this mean in like a material sense? And so again, you know, Dani brought up this idea of surrender. Pisces energy is sort of like surrendering to that. And honestly, when you surrender, it's not that you're like letting go of your control or power. If anything, it's almost like allowing it to flow organically. So those are some of the big things happening. Emily, do you want to talk about Mars stationing direct in Cancer?
Yeah, I'll just talk about that briefly. So Mars has been retrograde. I can't even remember at this point, since October, I believe, or since December. Time is an illusion. So Mars has been retrograde for a very long time, as Mars retrogrades go. Usually a Mars retrograde means that Mars is going to be in one sign for about 7 months, which is way longer than when he's direct. So we have here in the new moon chart was just a couple days after Mars stationed direct. So for all of these, right, like creative processes, or if things have just felt stagnant or slow, Mars and Cancer, we've talked about quite a bit in our Astro church, because he really has been active throughout his retrograde, but he's now direct, still in his fall in Cancer, which can be a very heavy energy, especially for folks who don't have this placement in their natal chart. It can really be a struggle. It can really be a slog. But but he is direct and he's moving forward. And so that is kind of some forward momentum and in these very watery realms. So in this beautiful caretaking sign of Cancer. So more to come on Mars, because in Aries season, we will have another Mars-Pluto opposition. And then the final transit, we need to talk about Venus retrograde. And so Venus retrogrades happen approximately every 18 months. And so this is the Venus retrograde chart from the moment that Venus stationed retrograde. So here she is at 10 degrees of Aries, which is interesting that she's very conjoined the moon. And in the astrology that I've learned from teachers like Austin Coppock, is that the moon is the translator of light. And so the relationship or the aspects that the moon has to other planets really does, like the moon is almost like a filter to us here on Earth because she's absorbing and reflecting the light. We see that very clearly and very obviously when she's receiving and reflecting the sun's light. And she's also doing that for all of the other planets. And so her condition, which means what sign she's in, the phase that she's in, and the aspect relationship that she's in really can tell us about the energies, these kind of cosmic energies that are being reflected down to Earth in the sublunary realm is what it would be called, or the sublunar realm. So the moon right on Venus, as she stations retrograde, is like the moon broadcasting like, hey, humans, this is going to be a important or just a not important, but a very noticeable, very impactful, very felt. You know, it's the moon. It's going to be a very felt Venus retrograde for all of us. And so we have Venus retrograding. She is in the sign of Aries, which is in the sign of her detriment. And Aries, Venus in Aries is like warrior goddess Venus. This is Venus who is feisty, who is fighting. She has to be very resourceful. She is not in her home sign. She's in the opposite of her home of Libra. So she has to be a very resourceful, very scrappy kind of energy here. And so Venus will be moving retrograde from 10 degrees of Aries all the way back to 24 degrees of Pisces. And a Venus retrograde is 40 days and 40 nights. And this really has to do, Venus retrogrades, I am deep in Venus cycle research right now. I have very synchronous connections to the Venus cycle. And I will give a little shameless plug that I'm writing a newsletter series about it. So I'll include it in the show notes if folks really want to get deep into the Venus cycle of it all with me. But these Venus retrogrades, to me, the storylines that I have felt and that I kind of hear from other people in the collective are stories of love and loss and renewal, because the retrogrades align when we see Venus physically in the night sky in her evening star phase, and then she gets closer and closer to the sun, and the midpoint of the retrograde is a cazimi. And then she is physically invisible because she's blotted out by the sun, and she's said to be in the underworld. And then she is reborn at the end of the retrograde, and she rises before the sun in the eastern sky as a morning star. And so this is a cycle and a transit that is truly ancestral. Our ancestors, all of us, all humans at some point, right? Whether it was hundreds or thousands of years ago, our ancestors revered Venus and were very aware of her cycle, her disappearance, her transition from evening star to morning star. This is just such a powerful cycle to attune to and to learn about and to become aware of and to build a relationship with, because it does awaken some type of ancestral remembrance. And so there is a very important mythological story related to Venus that I would like to share, but I just wanted to see if Dani or Aryn have any comments or thoughts about this Venus retrograde chart before we get into the story. And so the story that is directly connected to Venus retrograde, which if you are in astrological circles, mystical circles, occult circles, or just following, these people online, and that's making up your newsfeed on social media, is you very likely have heard the story of Inanna. And this story dates all the way back to the 3rd millennium BCE. So this is like 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. And that's just in recorded history, right? Like this myth is potentially even more ancient than that, and very likely more ancient than that, because our recorded history is limited in scope. So Dani wanted to note she has learned this story from the beautiful astrologer Chani Nicholas. And then I have heard this story also from Chani Nicholas, and also from astrologers Sarah Corbett, who is one of my astro herbal teachers. So the story of Inanna is that, one, it's an ancient Sumerian myth. And Inanna is known as the great goddess. Her name is also Ishtar. And one thing that I think it's important to note is that to ancient people, the stars and the planets were the literal physical embodiments of these gods and goddesses. And so their relationship to Venus as a star was that is the literal deity. And so when we tell the story of Inanna, it is completely inseparable from this Venus retrograde story of setting as an evening star and rising as a morning star, because that is physically what happens in the sky, in the material, tangible realms that we can see and sense. And these stories add so much meaning to this repeating cycle that happens over and over and over again. And so I just want to name that Venus, the literal star in the sky, is Inanna, right? Like they are one and the same. And so Inanna is a great goddess, and ancient Mesopotamian myths really did influence Greco-Roman myths that came later that really influenced the contemporary astrology that we have today. And so I kind of think of Inanna. I've actually been on a little synchronous journey right now that I won't totally get into because it's a side quest. But basically, I think Inanna encompasses several of our well-known goddesses. I think she encompasses like the great mother goddesses, which would be known more as like Ceres and Demeter. And then, of course, she encompasses Venus, Aphrodite. And I think she has a lot of Lilith in her as well. And Lilith is like the woman that is like burned by the patriarchy and demonized and villainized. And there are a lot of stories where Inanna is villainized as well. So to me, in my personal relationship with Inanna, she's really encompassing all three of these archetypes. And so we can see her as this great goddess and how she has then maybe been filtered and fractalized, Jupiter and Gemini, in different pantheons in later traditions, because these stories just get continually passed down through time, through people, through oral stories, right? And it's just interesting how they shapeshift and take form. So Inanna is the queen of heaven in ancient Mesopotamian mythology. She is beautiful. She is powerful. She is a leader. She's very visible. She's up in heaven. She's very recognizable. And she has a sister, Ereshkigal. And when I heard Chani do a retelling of this story, she also made note that Ereshkigal could also be seen not only as Inanna's sister, but another aspect of Inanna, right? Like that they are one and the same person, just two very different parts. And so Ereshkigal is the goddess of the underworld. And so she is unseen. She is in the shadow. She is in the unconscious, subconscious, subterranean realms of the underworld, right? That dichotomy versus Inanna is light in the conscious realm, unseen. You can almost kind of see some solar and lunar archetypes filtering through here. And so the story starts of the descent into the underworld, which again is a story of this Venus retrograde. Inanna goes to the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal. And there's various retellings of this story, and there's various versions. So some will say that Inanna's intentions behind visiting her sister. One could be that she is there to grieve with her sister who has just lost her husband. Some tellings say that she's there to deliver news to her sisters, and others say that she is there to demand that she wants access to this power and the divine rights of the underworld. And so I'm going to read an excerpt from Wikipedia, which will link in the show notes so you can take a look at this. But Inanna pounds on the gates of the underworld, demanding to be let in. The gatekeeper, Neti, asks her why she has come, and Inanna replies that she wishes to attend the funeral rites of Gugalana, the husband of my elder sister, Ereshkigal. Neti reports this to Ereshkigal, who tells him, bolt the 7 gates of the underworld. Then, one by one, open each gate a crack. Let Inanna enter. As she enters, remove her royal garments. Perhaps Inanna's garments, unsuitable for a funeral, along with Inanna's haughty behavior, make Ereshkigal suspicious. And so it's important to note here, this Venusian archetype, Inanna comes adorned. She has her lapis lazuli. She has her royal garbs, right? Like she's dressed, she's adorned. And so as she enters each layer of the underworld or goes through each gate of the underworld, she is stripped of these adornments that also serve as protection for her. And so following Ereshkigal's instructions, Neti tells Inanna she may enter the first gate of the underworld, but first she must hand over her lapis lazuli measuring rod. She asks why and is told it is just the ways of the underworld. She obliges and passes through. Inanna passes through a total of 7 gates, at each one removing a piece of clothing or jewelry she had been wearing at the start of her journey, thus stripping her of her power. Inanna then presents herself before Ereshkigal in a state of undress. Ereshkigal calls upon Anuna, the 7 judges of the underworld, who condemn Inanna to remain in the underworld. Ereshkigal then imposes upon her the condition of remaining dead and kills her. She subsequently hangs the goddess's corpse on a peg. And so this is when Venus has been completely vanished from the night sky. We cannot see her. She is in the underworld and she has physically died. Okay, that is like, this story speaks to that. So Inanna is missing for 3 days and 3 nights. And Enki, who I believe is Inanna's sibling, ends up sending the Kurgara to the underworld and issues instructions regarding their interactions with Ereshkigal, advising them to sympathize with the pain she is undergoing due to her children. And so these beings, they are sent on behalf of kind of the other gods and goddesses that are missing Inanna because she's been absent. And she's even said before her journey, I'm not back in 3 days, come and get me, essentially. And so they're coming to see what has happened to Inanna and hopefully to return her. And so because that these beings that get sent down there, they are sympathetic and empathize with Ereshkigal and really mirror and see her hurts and her pains, she actually then offers them sustenance and refreshment, and they decline, and they instead request that we would like the corpse of Inanna. And so she says yes, and then they pour the food of life and the drink of life provided by Enki onto the goddess's body, thus reviving her. However, before returning to Earth, Inanna is stopped by the judges of the underworld, who stipulate that if she wishes to return to Earth and remain there, she must locate a living being to assume her role in the underworld. And so this kind of takes us to the next chapter of the story, where Inanna is now reborn. She is risen back into Earth, which aligns with Venus rising as a morning star after she has been invisible in the underworld. And so now this can really relate to when Venus is maybe stationing direct, but is still moving through her shadow. This story is not done yet. There's still more that needs to be resolved. And so the resolution is, well, who is going to take Inanna's place in the underworld? And so there's several people, some of her advisors are thought to potentially be replacements for her, and she says no. And so she takes these demonic guardians of the underworld with her to see her husband. And it was found out that while she was gone and dead, her husband was not mourning her, which patriarchy says it all. Inanna, furious with him that he has not been mourning her properly, and his name is Dumuzi. And again, I'm probably mispronouncing some of these, so I apologize. But she offers him to take her place in the underworld. And so he does. However, this period of mourning, basically, eventually he does kind of see like the harms of his ways of not mourning his wife, and he does repent and do some mourning. And so essentially, again, there's many variations of this story, but Ereshkigal basically honors that, okay, you have gone through the actual mourning rites of their culture, of their tradition to mourn the loss of Inanna. And so it's seen, or his sister intervenes on his behalf. But essentially, it turns out that he only has to stay in the underworld for half of the year, and then his sister takes his place the other half of the year. And so that is the story of Inanna's descent into the underworld that cannot be separated from the Venus retrograde. And so I just wanted to see if there's anything that Dani or Aryn would like to add to that.
I think the only thing I want to say is that this story is very old. It's like, this is one of our oldest, like, written myths, and it's, the first written version is from like 2100 BC, so 4,000 years ago, but there are references to it from 4,000 BC. That's 6,000 years ago. That is like so wild. And the fact that it has evolved into, you can see glimpses of different stories throughout this story. So I just think that this is a story that lives in our bones. And it, and also Venus, the goddess Venus in Roman is the Roman name. But we told the story earlier about Aphrodite and her flight with her son Eros. Aphrodite is Venus. So there's a connection here to all these different singular deities being like very Piscean, all kind of the same thing. So I think that's the only thing I wanted to say.
I just want to add that I have this really cool book that I want to plug. It's called Eruptions of Inanna, Justice, Gender, and Erotic Power by Judy Gran, and it was dually published by two really awesome presses, the Nightboat Books and Sinister Wisdom. And really it goes through a lot of like the mythos and stories of these. Specifically, like Judy Gran is like orienting Inanna as like a inspiration for like queer feminist liberation. So if anybody wants to like look more into these myths with that particular framework, I would highly suggest this book. I haven't read all of it, but I've written parts of it, and it's really good.
Well, we gave some charts, and so I just wanted to pull up one last graphic here to show some of the dates of like when some, just to give kind of like a chronological viewpoint of when all of these transits have been unfolding. Aryn, would you like to go over these?
Yes. Okay.
Pause. This is our first reveal, our very first reveal of this lovely logo that was created us by Brie Legan. Is that how you say their last name?
Brie Legan, yes.
Yes. So just want to throw that out there.
Yes, absolutely. I've been thinking about this specific cup imagery is really resonant with me. So I'm going to quickly go through these transits. Again, I sometimes, my brain kind of phases out when other people say these things. So we have like the physical, if you're watching the video, you can actually see it on the screen. If you are listening, just bear with me. There's a lot going on in March in particular in Pisces season. So first we have the sun in Pisces, which entered Sun in Pisces February 18th and will leave March 20th. Then it'll be Aries season. We had Mars direct in Cancer, February 23rd. We had the new moon in Pisces, which we discussed on February 28th. Venus stations retrograde in Aries on March 1st. We also have Mercury moving into Aries on March 3rd. That lunar eclipse that happened technically this morning on March 14th. And just as we said, Mercury moved into Aries. Mercury is now stationing retrograde, which will happen tomorrow, March 15th. And then, like I said earlier, the sun is leaving Pisces on March 20th, which is our in-person event at the Jazz Gallery if you would like to attend.
Awesome.
So now
go
we're
ahead.
going to talk about what has been happening during these times, what events in our culture and country have been happening. So Dani, I'm going to pass this over to you to discuss more of that.
Yeah. This is probably going to be our longest episode, so I'm going to try to be as brief as I can be, but being an Aries Mercury with a Pisces moon, and a Gemini Venus, I sometimes just can't rein it in quite in the way that I would like to sometimes. Okay, so I think the first thing I want to talk about is first thing I want to talk about is what I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about Elon Musk again. We've been talking about him too much. I just want to say that he's spewing all kinds of illusions that are designed to make him and his cronies a bunch of money, and just like don't believe a word that he says. He is a white supremacist nepo baby is what he is. And I absolutely take every single thing he says and consider it to be garbage. There was someone on the internet, and I will find out who it is, that I saw call him a granny starver, and he is a granny starver. The lies he's pushing about Social Security right now, that is both serving the fascist state's interest in their anti-immigration policies, and it's also serving to potentially eliminate Social Security, which is so many people depend on it, and so many of us have paid into it our entire lives. So with this Venus retrograde stuff, and with being in Pisces with Virgo, the Virgo axis, talking about how that Pisces Virgo axis is connecting to our intuitive emotional responses to determine what right and wrong is, intuiting that and moving from that place. Pisces knows we're all connected, knows that everyone is divine, that everyone deserves love and sovereignty and happiness and autonomy, and to experience that connection to the divine. And with Venus retrograde in Aries, there's a lot for me around reclamation right now. Reclamation of our power, our authority over our own beliefs of what is right and wrong, over our communities, over our joy. And there's an element of not letting all their trickery and their lies take that from us and influence us to believe in fear-based narratives, instead believing in our humanity and fighting for our humanity via joy, etc. There is another story that I think kind of highlights this reclamation process that happened in Wisconsin. There was a bill on the table to ban gender-affirming care in Wisconsin, and there were a whole bunch of people that showed up to share their testimonies on both sides. And there was a man who had come to speak for the bill. He wanted to ban gender-affirming care. But after he heard the testimonies of actual trans people, he actually used his 2 minutes to apologize for being a bigot and say that he'd changed his mind, that he had never met gay people before, and he didn't really see that. Honestly, he kind of admitted to not seeing them as humans. It was this thing that was removed. So I just think that is really highlighting of Piscean compassion, how we're all connected. And also the belief that people can change, and maybe even the illusion of that too. There's something with that. I see Piscean as endless second chances sometimes. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying we need to give Elon Musk endless second chances, but I do think there's an element of recognizing how we're all, even the people that, regular people are not our enemies. You know, even if they believe things that are in service of our enemies, those aren't our enemies. And Pisces knows that we're connected to those people too. So there's to me, there's some magic in opening ourselves up to those types of connections and love as a transformative thing. And then the other piece of reclamation I want to talk about with this is, I mentioned it earlier, the disappearing of Mahmoud Khalil and the rise of ice, Neptunian illusion, storytelling, flipping narratives on their head. Like Jupiter's is in Gemini right now, and it's, you know, spinning all kinds of trickery narratives. But then also hundreds of American Jewish people putting their bodies on the line yesterday in service of their own belief, their own, you know, like I said, it was the day before Purim. It's when they celebrate Esther, who opposed genocide, and they took that and applied it to a real life genocide that is happening. So there's stories of reclamation, choosing life, choosing community, choosing to tie ourselves together and to jump in rather than disconnecting or disassociating or trying to control something by removing ourselves from it. So there's some stories of reclamation. Also, I just want to throw out that Pisces season is always when Mardi Gras and Carnival happens, and also when St. Patrick's Day happens. And St. Patrick's Day, you know, the Ireland itself is very Piscean, you know? It's rainy and lush and abundant, with song and poems. It's the home of the Sheedhe, the fairy realms. Storytelling is integral to it. And dance, music, art are all forms of resistance in Ireland. For example, I just saw a video by Tara Brading, who is a really awesome Irish ancestral writer, and I don't know their full title, but we'll put some information about Tara Brading in there. But they just did a thing about Irish dance as a form of resistance during British occupation in the 1600s. And they used it as a form of communication. So they would tap out messages to each other in their dances. So let me back up. Irish dance was banned at that time as the Irish language was banned. There's a lot of parts of their culture that were banned by the British as a form of control. And so they would teach each other the dance in secret. And so the dance teachers would come through and they would wear colorful clothing so that people could recognize that they were the dance teachers. And then they would have secret ceilidhs, which are like dance and music things, where they would teach each other this dance. And then they also would use it as a form of communication, like I said, where they would tap out messages to one another. So it was kept secret, you know, that Neptunian illusion, right? And passed down in a very ritualistic and initiatory way, and very creatively resisting oppression. You cannot break the Irish spirit. They've been fighting for 500 plus years, and it's literally like, and they have such solidarity for other people. Like they know how their struggle is connected to everyone else's struggles, you know, and they continuously are some of the first, definitely the first white people, definitely the first like Europeans to stand up and to say like genocide is wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to throw out there, St. Patrick's Day is about driving the imperialist snakes out of Ireland. Okay. It is about a dedication to joy and to play and to the spirit of resistance in Ireland. It is not about the police. So please, like, let's not do that, because it's literally the opposite of that. And Mardi Gras, obviously, you know, there's huge floats and parades in both Rio in Brazil and in New Orleans, honoring all the deities. There's imbibement and elation, taking us to other like realms of existence, planes of existence. Carnival and Mardi Gras are all about play and joy as resistance, as a connective experience, joining ourselves together to devote ourselves in ecstasy. So I just wanted to throw those things out there because I do think there's an element with Pisces of leaning into joy and play and creativity as a way to connect ourselves to each other, and honor what lights us up. So, Emily, do you want to talk about This Is It?
Yes, we had to do a tribute to This Is It because this is like such a historic institution, place, third space, right? Like as queer people and any marginalized groups, right, will always have a third space. And I really view these third spaces very Piscean and also very Aries, which is like the energy that's in the collective right now. And I really view This Is It closing as very Venus retrograde in Aries and Pisces story, because it's the ending of something, but it's also the beginning of something else, right? And so I think about this Venus retrograde story with This Is It and queer third spaces is like these third spaces had to be created. One, for that Piscean expression, right? Dani, like you're talking about with Mardi Gras and St. Patrick's Day and Carnival, right? These spaces for joy and creativity and self-expression, just as collective joy and also as resistance. And also queer third spaces to me really brings in the story, especially Venus and Aries, of like honoring self-sovereignty, right? Because a lot of what essentially like homophobia, anti-trans bigotry is rooted in wanting to control and repress people's genuine, authentic expressions. Because when folks can really stand in their queerness, in their transness, it completely rebukes and subverts these patriarchal and colonial systems that say gender is just a binary, sexuality is a binary, or even that sexuality is only one heterosexuality. And so when we're able to stand in our purest, truest, authentic expressions, that is self-sovereignty. And it is, it subverts these systems. And that's why there's so much oppression against queer people, against marginalized people. And so I just wanted to give that bigger framing for the context of this story. So I have been to This Is It. Even my baby sister has been to This Is It. They had on Wednesday nights an 18 and over night. So when she was not 21 yet, she got to go. But This Is It unexpectedly closed on Sunday, March 9th. So just a few days ago. It opened in 1968. And it is the oldest continuously, so this is kind of the clarifier here, continuously operating gay bar in the state of Wisconsin, and potentially one of the oldest in the nation. And that's according to the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project. Like, this place is legendary. And so the owner that founded This Is It and opened it, her name is June Brem. And she opened it in 1968, the year before the Stonewall riots. And so she opened this place so that to support her gay friends. Like, it sounds like, I'm not sure if she was queer herself or just a really powerful ally, and she just wanted to support her gay friends so that they didn't have to, it says on Wiki, or no, this is not from Wikipedia, but it's from a WPR article that I read about it, so that they didn't have to have terrible cocktails in the shadows, which is just kind of funny to me. So that they could actually come to a place in the heart of downtown Milwaukee. This bar is in the heart of downtown Milwaukee. It's right on Cathedral Square. It is downtown. It is out in the public in the heart of the city. So she opened this with the intention that people could be supported and welcomed, and that they would not have to hide, especially when we think of the 1960s, right? Like how just overtly homophobic, anti-trans, like just the culture was. And it was like very scary to be a queer person back then. So this is a very radical act that this bar opened. And so this was the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project kind of named some of the really monumental things that happened in kind of queer liberation history, and how this bar in Milwaukee served as the site of celebrating these big historic wins for the queer community. So some of them include the Non-Discrimination Ordinance of 1980. And so people would celebrate at This Is It after that. The Gay Rights Law of 1982, which in my research, I learned that Wisconsin was the first state to pass this law at the state level. So Yeah, Wisconsin, even though we have been having some hard times since the Scott Walker era, Wisconsin does have a pretty radical history when we go back far enough. The other wins that were celebrated here, the first annual Pride March and Rally of 1989 in Milwaukee, and also Senator Tammy Baldwin's election. This was when she was just running to be a member of the House of Representatives before she became our senator that we have today. But she's a gay woman. She's a lesbian. And so an openly gay Wisconsin lawmaker getting elected, and they had her victory party in 1998 at This Is It. So, and then of course they supported local marriage equality in 2014 and then national marriage equality in 2015. And that's wild that it was almost 10 years ago that that law was passed. So those are just some of the historic celebrations and historic wins for the queer community that have been celebrated at this bar. And so This Is It is known kind of in the community as TITS, you know, for the acronym. So most people call it TITS. And the bar really gained more notoriety in 2021 when famous Milwaukee drag queen Trixie Mattel became a co-owner of the bar in 2021. And this was directly in response because she did not want the bar to go under in the early days of the pandemic. And so she stepped up as a drag queen who really made a name for herself and created the Trixie Mattel drag queen persona in Milwaukee, right? Like she really just, even though she lives in Los Angeles, she really wanted to honor it. So it also is known as, some people might know it as Trixie Mattel's Bar. And really just some of the things that I wanted to share was that not only has this bar been a third space for queer people, it has also been a hub of drag arts and drag performance in the city of Milwaukee. I have been there to see drag shows. That's like, I don't drink anymore, so the only reason I've gone there is to watch drag performers and have a gay ass time because I love drag. I love me some drag. And it was a really special place. And as I was reading all these articles, I mentioned they had every Wednesday night, they had an 18 and over night. And that was specifically a night that young drag performers would come if they're under the age of 21, that they would get to come and like practice their art form and gain some confidence. And so this is a huge loss, very Pisces, massive ending. And there's a lot of people that have been hit hard by this loss. And so I was reading the article in the journal Sentinel, and there was a DJ that was set to perform this coming weekend at the bar. And when he found out that the bar was closing, he did an impromptu set on Sunday, and all of these people in the community went to This Is It, and he played a DJ set outside of the bar on Sunday, and all of these people gathered and shared their memories of This Is It. So I just really had to do a tribute to this bar, because even though I've only been there a few times, I just feel like how deeply important this bar has been to the queer community in Milwaukee historically and presently. And then in the show notes, there is a GoFundMe right now. So the general manager of This Is It started a GoFundMe because, like Aryn mentioned in Universal Shoutouts, there are many bartenders and many industry workers that are now without income and without a job. And so they set the goal to start at $10,000. And when I checked it last night, it was already at $11,000. They had a list of like 20 workers though, right? And if we think about those funds being equitably distributed, like, and how much most people's rent is over $1,000, right? So I'm going to link it into the show notes, and I really would love to call on our community, anyone who has had a connection to the queer community in Milwaukee, to the This Is It bar. If you can contribute any amount to this GoFundMe, it's going to be directly redistributed to the workers who are now out of work at this unexpected closing. And then just the last thing I want to weave in, because I think it's very right. We're in Pisces season. Everything is connected. Endings and beginnings. And so like Dani mentioned, our friend Vanessa Rose, who is a chef in Milwaukee, out and proud and trans, and Vanessa's cooking is some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life. So shout out Vanessa. We are definitely inviting her to be interviewed on the podcast, so she can tell her story in her own words. But just wanted to hype up that Mothers, Vanessa's concept, which I have heard a little. I've talked with V and have heard firsthand her talk about it, but really conceptualizing mothers not only as a dining and food experience, but as a third space for queer people. And so if we have this big ending of this is it, and I'm going to call it out and affirm it, that mothers is on the horizon, right? And I already know that V is like stepping up to collaborate and support like a lot of these drag artists who, and there's a really great article I'll link in the show notes where V was getting interviewed, that all of these drag performers that relied on This Is It also for their income and for their performance, right? To perform. There's now, I believe, a pop-up event happening this weekend. And I know Vanessa is involved with this pop-up to cater, and actually like canceled another event that she was doing to show up for her queer community, because that is queer solidarity right there. And is now being part of this pop-up event to support these drag performers who no longer have This Is It as their home to perform. So endings and beginnings, I had to do a solid, and just, yeah, the queer community has my whole heart. And I am blessed to be a part of this vibrant community in Milwaukee. So just so much love and shout out to This Is It and everyone impacted by this loss. And I'll hand it over to Aryn for our story.
Thank you, Emily. So to give an overview, we talked about the flight of Aphrodite, which is the Pisces myth story of like why we have like the two fish in that perpetual circle. And so I really think like the biggest thing that stands out to me in this story is this collaboration where they made the decision to like do this together. And so that just feels really powerful in some of the things that we're experiencing right now in the United States, where like there is so much power when we combine our ideas, our energies, our resources, and even this sort of the pivot that they made, this decision to like go into the river, which is a very like non-linear, unexpected, unconventional way to avoid like a monster chasing after you. It's just really powerful to me. This idea that like their strength relied not necessarily on their like physical prowess or their ability to mirror the monster's like force and energy. They made a decision for like connection and like softness, and which just feels very Piscean, of like transforming, also that mutable energy of like pivoting, like, oh, this is happening, what are we going to do? Like, this was not according to plan, and mutable energy has the ability to drastically change course just with decisions or even mindset. So there's this story of like survival, resistance if we transform, if we're not super fixed on like our physical forms, right? I think too, we talked a lot about the Virgo Pisces axis of Virgo wanting some sort of control. And like part of that is like, if you know all the details, you won't feel like you're surprised, right? Or if you know sort of like the structure of things, it feels less overwhelming or less scary. And that's all good. And that's useful energy as well, right? And I think Pisces also brings in like, there's always going to be things you don't expect. There's always going to be new challenges that crop up that you cannot possibly prepare for. So having that orientation of softness in the sense of like, you can change forms, even like this idea of molding clay. You can move clay in different ways, and that we're not all like fixed in one particular path or form, or even like body. Like there's even ways like, yes, we are a solid physical form. We can't necessarily like change our bodies per se, but we can change our routines. We can change our habits. We can change like the ways in which we engage with our physical form. And so, yeah. Shedding their forms to survive, that's some powerful stuff. But also like it's not like they changed in a way where they were indistinguishable from their previous selves. Like we still all have our core. And that also feels like a profound theme of transness, even like my experience of like taking testosterone hormone therapy, where it's like I am changing some aspects of myself, but I'm still me. Like I'm still connected to myself at the core. And so yeah. Dani wrote the note, flowing together keeps us from being lost. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to say too, with this story, like the thing about Pisces energy, and we have North Node in Pisces, it's hungry, and it's uncomfortable. And part of that is we're moving away from this Virgoan, healing this Virgoan need to know and control, and moving towards more trust and surrender. There's a lot we don't have control over in our world. And I think that Pisces knows that and is able to accept that in a way. I'm a Pisces moon, and the way that I move through grief, grief is eating me alive until I let it just flow through me, And I think that's a really intelligent, Pisces, wisdom that it carries. Softness and connection and joy are not weaknesses. They're forms of survival and resistance. And choosing joy and choosing to surrender to the truth of what is, and also believe in something greater and something bigger. It's an act of rebellion. That is devoting ourselves to something better, even in the face of the truth of things that we can't control or change. It's not just an escape. They weren't just escaping, they were evolving. They were okay, the truth is we can't fight this storm with a blade. We can't do that. But what we can do is we can tie ourselves together and jump into it and believe, So reclaiming ourselves requires surrender, but it's always a return home. Pisces is the return to that, the connection of everything. So yeah. Emily, do you want to talk about close us out with our personal reflections today?
Yes, beautiful. And I just want to kind of wrap all of this beautiful flowing Pisces energy in just a little brief recap of what we've talked about today. So of course, we've been talking about the expansiveness of Pisces season and also the opposite of Virgo. We have Aryn gave a beautiful testimonial of the Nine of Pentacles, our tarot connection, which is really, I think, a very Piscean and yes, Virgoan experience, but that Piscean nature of rooting into all the abundance that is around us, right? The abundance that flows just simply because we are humans on this planet at this time. And we have these beautiful bodies to live and experience in. I introduced Tulsi as our first herbal connection, the queen of the herbs, a plant that is the plant embodiment of the goddess Lakshmi, of wealth and fortune and prosperity. And that is a plant that represents the divine within, very Piscean. We talked about the major transits and, of course, the myth, which Dani and Aryn just wrapped up, the myth of Eros and Aphrodite. And then we talked about the major transits and the current events. And we talked about Inanna's descent into the underworld and the Venus retrogrades. So there's a lot, such as Pisces season. But we want to end with some personal reflections and invite you to take some time to think or share this with a trusted loved one or journal about this. And we would love if you wanted someone to share this with. We do have a Google form in the show notes. You can share your reflections with us, and you can let us know if you want us to share those reflections in a future episode, or just to share them with us to be received by someone. So, questions to leave you on. What are your core values? How do they ground and guide you during change and transition? What lights you up and brings you joy? How can you cultivate collective joy and play as an act of resistance? And then the last one, besides money, what abundance flows through your life that you can root yourself in and express gratitude for?
Thanks so much, Emily. If you want to share a universal shout out, or if you want to share a response to your personal question, whether or not you want us to share those things on air, you can find in our link tree on Instagram a link to a form where you can submit some of those things. So this has been the Pisces season Astro Church sermon. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.